It's not very often that lightning strikes twice. It's very rare that a sequel is greater than the original. And it's also very, very rare that the game is able to take everything that it learned from the previous game and then put it to even greater heights. Santa Monica Studios has managed to find the magic in a bottle again and kept enough of it from God of War 2018 and funneled it into God of War Ragnarok. Ragnarok can only be described as the end of a two-part saga which not only stands on its own, but enhances and makes me want to replay the first game. It's a testament to all the hard work that Santa Monica Studios has put in, and every single person involved with the game should be proud. It gives me great pleasure to talk about Ragnarok and share my detailed thoughts with you today. Before we start though, I'd like to give a huge disclaimer. Number one, thank you to PlayStation UK for giving me an early code of the game. I know it's taken me roughly a week to get this review out, but I did get it the day before release, and this game is a chunky boy. And I would also like to give another huge disclaimer that all the footage you see, gameplay elements talked about, and cutscenes will be from the first 15 hours or so of the game. This is to avoid as many story spoilers as possible. I think it's impossible to talk about aspects of this game without alluding to or mentioning certain key aspects, but I won't be discussing the story and the story beats. I'll be talking about the narrative, the overarching narrative, and just what I perceived from playing the game. But with that out of the way, let us begin talking about God of War Ragnarok. Ragnarok is a story that has had many interpretations over history. The MCU has been more prevalent quite recently, but there's books and stories, and it's been told in multiple ways, ultimately ending in the fall of the Aesir or the fall of Asgard, the Asgardian gods. God of War Ragnarok has a very similar theme, but you could argue knowing some of the stories and the interpretations before playing God of War Ragnarok does not necessarily spoil the game, but it also enhances the experience because the writers of Santa Monica have found a way to tell a compelling and engaging narrative that also grabs elements of the source material, and then they've taken it and twisted it into their own thing so it stands on its own. So things that you think are predictable aren't, which I like. I loved this aspect of the game. There are many themes that have through lines from 2018's game all the way through into Ragnarok. We follow the struggle of a dad and a son who are trying to do everything they can to protect one another, but also allow each other to grow and become more than what the world is telling them to be. Prophecy is a huge theme here. It's telling everyone what their story will be, how it starts, how it finishes, and that people are just the sum of their actions. There is also the conversation about changing the prophecy and changing fate, and there's a lot of conversation around defying fate that you'll see throughout Ragnarok. There's also another aspect, which is that you can grow as a person and that you are not set on a path that the prophecy has for you. You get to write your own ending instead of having it written for you. Make the choices that you want to make. And I know it's not the story that's that deep, but that is what I took from the narrative. It's being and not being the person that you're supposed to be via a prophecy or via fate. You get to be the ultimate, ending of your own story. You get to write the ending. It isn't written for you. In 2018, we get to saw Kratos and Atreus go on a journey of discovery. Kind of Atreus teaching his dad how to be human, and Kratos teaching his son how to be a god, and ultimately preparing him for the world and what he will have to live in the eventual time that Kratos passes away or is no longer alive in the series. In Ragnarok, this takes on a new meaning as Atreus is older, he's more of a teenager now, and he's prone to teenage things, questions, rebellion, also just experiences of being naive, Also having to, understand when people tell lies to other people, finding themselves and learning through the mistakes that they make, which we've all made at one point in our life when we were teenagers. I loved following Atreus in this, but one thing that really stood out to me was Kratos. Kratos is still trying to find purpose in this game, or in the story of the two games. He's trying to be a dad, but you can see that he's actively mourning the loss of Atreus' mother and his wife. And you can see how it affects him. The performance from Christopher Judge is phenomenal. The mocap that they did really shows the emotion of all the actors and actresses in this game. You can look at him and you can see that it affects him. He's, even though he's stoic and gruff, the writers have found a way to give him layers and portray emotions subtly, but with deep emotional impact. He may be subtle, but you can tell what Kratos is thinking just by his minimal actions and the silences that he says. And he doesn't say a lot of words until certain moments in the story, but he does not say a lot. But it's so good in the way that they write it that it kind of caught me off guard when they did show growth and change that is different from the character, which is ultimately what you want to see. You can also tell that the relationship between Kratos and Atreus, there is a deep love for each other, and they are willing to defy prophecy, defy fate, in order to keep each other safe, even if that means pushing themselves away from each other, which naturally happens with teenagers and parents at certain ages, and then they come back together, and you can see that this is a really deep relationship between two headstrong characters and doing everything they can to hold on to something they value so dearly, which has a lot of relation to what many of us will do in real life, and that's why it's so impactful. Ragnarok doesn't only focus on Kratos and Atreus, though. There are relationships with a lot of the side characters from the previous games. We've got Sindri and Brock that we've seen previously, Freya, of course. There's going to be a lot of impact there, but I won't go too deep into them. But they have a lot more emotional weight this time that they kind of lacked in the previous game. But now we know them, they're more familiar. We get to learn a lot more about them. They're fleshed out, and their story even is more emotional at times than Kratos and Atreus. And for the two gods that we got to see that weren't in the previous game, Thor and Odin, that we get to see right at the start, they defy many norms of the light-hearted MCU variants of these characters. They have a lot of depth and very surprising at times with their motives and what they're trying to do. And it's very different from Baldur in 2018 game, and I love that. I love the different takes on all of the different Aesir gods in this game. There are other characters I would like to talk about, obviously, but that is for something I want you to experience for yourself. The story is deep, emotional, and has themes of love, loss, grief, regret, but also hope and growth and change. And this is me avoiding spoilers as best I can, and it's not that the game touches in all of these different themes, and it's just present throughout at times. There's such weight with how the characters talk and emote with one another. There's pauses and silences that really lets you drink in the scene and how powerful it can potentially be at times. Even in the funny moments where you'll be out in the world and Mimir and Atreus and Kratos are just having these little tidbit conversations, talking about stories, just the little dialogue back and forth in-game rather than in the cutscenes is just funny. I enjoy it, and it's good to just stop and listen. Sometimes I found myself going slower in sections just so I could hear what the dialogue had to say and what it had to offer. There was a lot of times throughout this game where I was just in silence, drinking it in. There was a lot of points throughout this game where I was just sat in silence, and I was very, very close to tears because I was so connected to the emotional story that was there. And I feel that that is something that everyone can relate to if you play this game. Everyone in their own life is either a parent that's trying to protect their child, dealing with them growing up and moving away and becoming with what you've taught them, teaching them from their mistakes, and even you remember being your younger self. And I definitely did that. Remember being young and hopeful and growing up, making mistakes, making friends. But not only that, the themes of loss, family, fear of what's next, and what are we doing, what's your next purpose, is why I love this story so much. It makes me think of my own life, but not only that, in the game, the writers give closure to all of these themes throughout a variety of different characters in the game, and Kratos and Atreus are right there as well, and they are, you know, some of my favorite characters in video games at the moment, and even some of the antagonists that we got in this game are very good as well. I love this story so much. Hats off to the writing team at Santa Monica Studios. They have written pure gold, and I loved every moment. I always talk about gameplay in every single one of these reviews, but it can elevate a top tier story or leave a lot on the table. And more specifically here, the world design and level design is just on another level compared to the previous game. It doesn't just bring a wonderful combat system from the previous game, but adds in more of the semi-open world level design to each of the realms, rather than just being Midgard, which we traveled around quite a lot. Even though there was a lot that you could explore in the other realms in the previous game, the exploration has gone up so much more, and there's a lot more to do and explore, and it expands on at least 3 or 4 of the realms that are explorable in this semi-open world. There's the different sleds that you can go on, and there's also the boats that you can use to travel around these areas. As you go along your journey, you will step foot into each of the realms, but each of the areas you visit, the story is carefully thought out with puzzles and things to make you think through. I would like an option to turn off the NPC's help so I can figure it out myself, because they do start to give you a lot of the puzzle answers if you spend a little bit too long. That would be nice to turn off, but it's a minor gripe. It's something that doesn't really bother me, especially if I'm just trying to get through the game. The journey you take to each of the realms is different though. They are beautifully designed, having their own styles, such as the waterways of the dwarves in Svartalheim, or the contrast of dark and light elves in Alfheim. There's even Vanaheim in there as well. And the realms have had so much more love poured into them, and it shows. When I'm done with this review, I'm going to go and explore a whole lot more of the game, and obviously go and check out all of the different collectibles, try and maybe 100% the game, maybe platinum achievement it, because the game allows you to keep your attention with different favors, mini boss fights that you can go around, similar to the Valkyries in the previous game. There's obviously the collectibles, there's the puzzle chests, there's just a lot, and I spent a lot of my time in my playthrough making sure I had a look around and spending a little extra time, because it could help with upgrades and finding those little secrets, which it did actually help me in my playthrough. The design team were on point for the whole game. Nothing felt half done or unfinished. It showed the beauty of what the Aesir gods or the Vanir had put together with some of the structures that they had, and I think Santa Monica has also nailed the scope that makes things feel big and expansive, but it doesn't feel like just empty space. It feels alive when you're traveling around these areas. Even the puzzle chests that have runes on them are a challenge, because you have to think of creative ways to be able to complete them. Some are more hidden, some require a little bit of extra thought, but that's just like a small example of what is there. The action set pieces in the main story and even some of the side content are very popular from the previous games, and it's the same here. There's always crazy over-the-top things, and it never feels out of place when you have them, and usually it's during big boss fights that you tend to have these massive set pieces. I can't explain any more without going into a full-on review of each individual realm and what I liked, and it's juicy. There's a lot there to take in. Speaking of juicy though, let's talk about the combat. The reimagined combat system that came with God of War's revamp in 2018 was a welcome one. It added a lot of complexity, but also made everything available with the weapons. It just made it approachable, and it made it approachable at all skill levels. It didn't matter if you were a seasoned Dark Souls player or you were just jumping into this game for the story and to find out what the next chapter was. Ragnarok takes this system and not only adds to it with a slew of upgrades on the skill trees, but it also adds a third weapon to the mix in the form of a spear. You can consider this a spoiler for what you obtain in the game, but I simply can't talk about the entirety of the combat system without just talking about this little aspect, which is the new weapon. Each weapon has a different weight and feeling to them. The Frost Axe especially feels heavy, and the weapon I would use to get the most big hits on enemies, and that would build up a lot of stun. And the Frost Awaken ability that you would get, which you hold down triangle, you could get some pretty cool, pardon the pun, combos and start to chain a bunch of stuff together. But it's not just the Frost Axe. It's also the Blades of Chaos, which definitely give you more range, and obviously the potential to burn enemies. But in the first 10 hours of playing, it was just a joy to find my own combos when I was playing. It felt like I'd flipped a switch and something was just able to put out all these multi-part combos like I was in a fighting game, and just juggle enemies using one weapon, swapping to a different weapon mid-combo, switching, hitting, ending it with something. But it's not the fact that you can do this with the weapons in the game, it's the fact that you feel super powerful when doing it. The spear adds to this as well, brings in a whole host of new animations, and it also has its own unique ability where if you throw a ranged attack, you can hold triangle and it will explode the spears, which is a really neat effect, and also some of the cool runic attacks that there were. And the combos that you could get from that didn't feel unnatural, out of place. It's just unbelievably seamless, which is just incredible to me that the combat team was able to just add in one extra weapon and open up another boatload of possibilities while also expanding on the previous weapons that we already had. As I've said, this all combines into one big system that someone that wants to get every inch of the combat down, they can do. I played a little bit more aggressive when I was trying to get through the game, a little bit more aggressive to be able to make this video, and I played on the middle difficulty, which was give me balance, which was still a challenge, even if I was under-leveled or under-prepared. And I would love to try and play this game on a higher difficulty, or the Give Me God of War difficulty in future on like a new game plus, to add to that combat and learn it a lot more, because I could keep playing this combat for a long time. Literally, you can chain parries off a double attack from an enemy, go into a 2-weapon combo, into another parry, into a runic attack, and then finish off with a stun animation that when you stun an enemy, you can click in the right analog stick and finish them. And I just want to point out, these were some of the most satisfying things I have seen in a video game this year, and for quite a while. The animations and the finishes in combat were next level. Like, I had very visceral and involuntary reactions to the different finishes. You can hear every punch, crunch, and just, it's all bloody and violent even after the 100th time, and I loved doing it. I could continually do these finishes, and each enemy had different unique ones, which made it that much more fun to perform. The combat system is why I think God of War stands out as it does, because it's one of those features that, you know, great combat, awesome animations, and approachable systems it's just the reason I can keep playing for hours and hours, and it's so easy to get into, and why I can recommend this game to a lot of people. And especially with a lot of the accessibility options, you're going to be able to engage with this quite a lot. I know there are elite combat systems out there, for example, you know, your Dark Souls, etc. List off here in the comments, but I've really connected with this one, and the more I could master it, I can only imagine how much fun people that are playing on the top difficulty are having. And even just on the lower end, just being able to beat the crap out of everything is super satisfying and really fun. Progression in single-player games can always be a tough one. I think that Ragnarok has got a good balance on making the game challenging enough, but also being able to allow you to unlock things as you progress through the story, and then going and doing side stuff to get more materials and upgrades. For armor and weapons, you pretty much get the required materials and keep upgrading them as you go, and then you play into the various stats and perks that you get on there, so you can focus into strength or defense. But there's a couple of extra stats. For example, you can go into a heavy luck build, which will allow you to get more health on a kill, or get more a rage burst and have a higher chance of that happening. And this also applies to your weapons as well. The runic attacks are upgradable via XP. The attached handles and like little things that you can add to the weapon are also upgradable as well. And there's a lot of depth here if you want to focus on a specific playstyle, and I could see a lot of people spending a lot of time with this if they're on the higher difficulties. I spent a lot of time with it leveling up, and I may have been a little bit over leveled when I was playing on my playthrough because I did a lot of the side content as well. The other form of progression is not only for Kratos but also for Atreus. The more XP you earn, the more abilities that you can unlock for them. Pretty bog standard stuff, but there's this extra effect for at least Kratos, which when you have used an ability that you particularly like a certain amount of times and done it successfully, you can then upgrade it to, I think it's gold tier, and you can get yourself the ability to have stun damage or extra stun damage, element damage, or momentum for your rage bar, slash your immolation thing, which you can press L1 and triangle to like access that. And this was awesome because it gives you the ability to focus into one attack that you really enjoy and one particular combo, and then you're able to upgrade that and, you know, go into the build or your chosen combat style. And I think the game does a good job of kind of pushing you towards this, because it will say at points in the main quest line, go and visit X character when you are ready. So it gives you that little nudge to be like, hey, go and explore some of the side content, progress a little bit, and then come back. Which I highly advise that you do, because it has definitely helped me have a lot more fun with the game, going and just upgrading and doing a lot of the other side content. Before I round out the last part of the review, I want to talk about the music and the soundtrack of the game. It's just wonderful. Each piece is brought in at the right moment for each scene, either being very quiet or lifting an emotional moment. And you know it's a good soundtrack because you're humming the main theme and different songs from the game when you're not playing the game. You're just smiling and imagining that you're playing the game in your head. And I have had that numerous times over the last few days, and I cannot credit that enough. The score is fantastic, the sound design is fantastic, and yeah, I'm probably going to be listening to this soundtrack quite a bit before the year is out. God of War Ragnarok is very much a sequel, but it is its own game. It can stand on its own without needing 2018's success to ride off. It's well crafted throughout the entire game, albeit some minor gripes here and there that are very, very small and kind of afterthoughts when I think about it. Santa Monica have set the bar so high that they're the only ones that are going to be able to reach it and push it beyond the limits of the previous game to this one. All of the aspects, the combat, the world design, the storytelling, and the word I always come back to is weight. Each aspect of the game has a certain weight to it. It's delivered with nothing that's just tacked on. That there's the right amount of fat on the meat, if you want to use that as a slogan, and it's not just tacked on there for the sake of player progress. You could complete this entire game with just going straight through the main story and not doing any of the side content, but it presents it so well that it'd be rude not to give it a little bit more of your time. On a personal level, I mentioned a little bit earlier, the story has had a lasting impact already, and especially when it comes to touching on the past, not being defined by the mistakes you have made, and opening yourself up to change and growth, not being defined by what the plan is written out for you. And it's not just that, it's just the story is compelling, and I don't often give games a label or buzzwords because every person sees games differently. But for me, God of War Ragnarok will certainly be on a lot of people's Game of the Year lists, and it's going to sit atop of mine for sure. It's amazing that this studio has been able to replicate success not once but twice, and blown its own records away in the process. It's a generational game, and for me, God of War Ragnarok is a gaming masterpiece. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch this review. If you have, you like the content, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Check out all the links in the description. And as always, this has been It's Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.